And thank you all who have joined. So if your day has gone anything like mine, it's been anything but normal between the winter weather and then our furnace went out here in our office. So it's a bit chilly here, but we're going to make the most of it. So thanks again for joining us. We're here to talk about indoor mapping. Specifically, you're going to focus with this presentation. We'll talk more about ArcGIS Indoors and hope you can pick up some valuable information on it, as well as some best practices and maybe how your organization might be able to begin taking steps to move into the digital age here with the indoor mapping. So let's get started. Just an overview of what we'll touch on here. So I'm going to have about 10 to 15 minutes of slides that we'll cover. Then we'll jump into the demonstration part. I've got a couple backup videos if I need to roll those. If the technical difficulties kick in, we can count on those backups. So, but we'll touch on what exactly Indoors is and consists of, as well as how does it work. Prerequisites, more about prerequisites that users of the indoor solution are going to want to have before they dive into it. Definitely there's some things that we'll discuss along those lines. Necessities, things that you've got to have to get started. I'm hoping to show you some really good practical getting started tips and tricks. Trying to cut out some of the fluff. So, and then I'm going to share some specific challenges and successes that we've had here at CloudPoint as we've started to get into this realm with the indoors. And then if we have enough time there at the end, I'm hoping to be able to show you some real demonstrations with the software. So what is ArcGIS Indoors? It's a collection of tools, and it streamlines the process of bringing CAD and floor plan data into GIS, and then deploying a interactive solution through web or mobile. So the idea is, obviously there's an information model that Esri has as part of this solution. It's called the ArcGIS Indoors Information Model. And that is what you plug all your data into. And then from that, there are geoprocessing tools that come along with the solution. And you can use those geoprocessing tools to quickly spin up and deploy these indoor maps. There's also data that you can download when you do the install. There's product data for ArcGIS Pro that you can download and install on your machine to have additional information to help you with indoors. And then it's the key is having these layers configured properly and able to publish those. Now, keep in mind, we're going to be publishing this data to either an enterprise portal that is licensed for indoors, that requires a special licensing from Esri, or now, as of late, we don't have ours set up yet, but your ArcGIS Online account, you should be able to now enable that for ArcGIS Indoors use. So the solution is very attribute intensive, which we'll look at. It requires a good knowledge of attribute rules, and data reviewer are both beneficial things to look at. And then a big part of it is having clean CAD data or BIM data. That is crucial. We find time and time again, if we have that data is not prepared properly or clean, then we can have difficulties of deploying a good solution. And then publishing web maps and mobile maps. And then we'll touch on the indoor viewer template, which is kind of to me, it's the backbone of the engagement along with the mobile app. So as far as technical requirements go, you need ArcGIS Pro 2.6 or later. I think we were running it with 2.5, but I probably wouldn't recommend that. Enterprise 10.8.1 or indoors enabled. You also need a GIS Professional Advanced User type with the publisher role enabled on that portal. And then the nice thing with the Indoors package, it comes with the extensions that you see here that are all necessary or needed to be able to deploy different parts of the Indoors solution. As far as how it works, so downloading and installing it and getting it set up. In fact, we've got a YouTube tutorial on our channel that specifically touches on that process on downloading, installing, configure it. We will create the geodatabase. I'll show you how to do that. And then loading these floor plans in there. So floor plans, basically you're trying to take a plan view, like some architecture drawings or as-builts of a floor plan of a building. And the objective is to get those into GIS format into polygons. And points of interest are a key component of the indoors solution, because points of interest will be helpful for navigation. Those are going to be useful for searching, and obviously pretty much everything we're going to relate with as far as engaging with data is involved in those points of interest. Then we're going to, the key component of this also is having a network for the routing. If you want to do directions and routing within the building, you have to have a network enabled with a route service. And then we'll talk a little about the authoring the maps or the 3D scenes. Indoors is also has a 3D component as well, which we'll be able to look at. And then finally being able to publish and deploy these solutions and be able to take advantage of those. So some prerequisites, things you will want to know before you get started with this. And I would encourage you to really take these to heart. Whoever will be doing the data preparation of your indoors data, who will be deploying the solution, will definitely want to be familiar with some of these topics. So basic understanding of BIM data. You don't have to be a BIM expert. I certainly am not. I'm not real familiar with Revit. I haven't worked with it much, but it is very helpful if you can have some understanding of BIM, and particularly with Revit files. And then working with vertical coordinate systems. This is important. Remember, the indoor solution is floor aware, is what Esri uses that terminology. It's floor aware, meaning when you navigate from one floor to the next, your interactive GIS is switching from floor to floor. And having that vertical component is so important to be able to have that user-friendly navigation. Working with 3D scenes and ground surfaces is also important. And we'll touch on that here in a minute, where you want to be able to have your building obviously be at the ground level, but using the correct heights and whatnot. So then experience with editing in 3D environment in ArcGIS Pro. This is also very important because it's something we can kind of dive into this, but then you find that if you don't have the foundation for some of the capabilities like 3D editing, you can get yourself into trouble, or at least delay the progress on what you're trying to accomplish here. So Esri's got some great learning plans out there. I've really been impressed with what I've found on Esri's learning site. You can create your own learning plans. And what I really like is, and what I've done already is, for some of our staff here, I've created a learning plan and I can assign that to them through their ArcGIS Online account, which is really handy. Having an understanding of attribute rules is helpful as well, and then being able to publish and configure web maps. So let's talk about floor plan data. This is obviously the key component. This is how we get started. You want to have some floor plan data to begin with and to get going. Georeferencing and digitizing as-builts. That's your basic, kind of your, maybe your worst case, where you're digitizing these, you're drawing these in manually. You maybe have a PDF of a floor plan. You're going to georeference that in ArcGIS Pro and then digitize your rooms that way. That's one possibility. You could also import CAD data, and there's some tools and functionality in the indoor solution to do that. Esri has created some tools there. You can import BIM data, which is really nice to be able to bring that directly in. And then, or you can collect data with the terrestrial scanning system. So the ones I've got highlighted here are mounted, I'm calling it. And this is just for like on a tripod here. This is getting your highest accuracy. Mobile, which would cover like a cart in this case, or the backpack unit. I kind of lump both those into a mobile solution for scanning. And then lastly, I call it personal. It's the new iPhone 12 Pro or iPad Pro. I just got an iPad Pro a few weeks ago, and I'm playing around with the LiDAR capabilities with that. I haven't seen a good example of that yet, where they've had a large size floor plan that's been able to be scanned directly using the iPad Pro, but I think it's a matter of time before they get there. But at this point, I think that LiDAR component on an iPad Pro might be better just for either very small areas or objects, scanning things like that. So, okay, so setting up the solution. Let's go ahead and take, I'm going to jump out of here and let's look at ArcGIS Pro. And what I want to do here is I'd like to run a short video just talking about our difference in the ground surface elevations and the importance of that. So um, I'm going to start this video and you tell me if we have audio. Actually, tell you what, we'll just go ahead and we'll just bypass that. We'll show it in real time here. So we're gonna open this project. I'm calling it ground elevation. And what I want to show you here is I got some BIM data from a provider, and I want to show you how when I brought it in, I thought we could just take the ball and run with it, creating these layers from indoors from BIM, and come to find out not all BIM drawings are equal. And this was one that certainly was lacking some information. But I think this is good to look at so we can point out some of the areas that are missing or things to look for when you do get BIM data, that we can obviously want to take advantage of or be aware of, so we don't have problems moving forward. And while that's pulling up, we'll go ahead and jump on to part of our other slides here. So the information model, we'll touch on reviewing that. We're going to show some detailed information on those different layers in the Indoors Information Model. We'll talk about some map templates, and then this idea of pathways, which is what you use to generate your routes with, and then the publishing and engagement. We can look at those items as well. Okay, so our Pro project is pulled up here. It's open. You can see if I look at, okay, I've got a BIM model here of a building. But what's interesting here is when I look at these layers over here on the left, the BIM detail, what we'll notice here is I want to right click and go to properties on these layers. Okay. And this is very important to note. Again, we're in a 3D scene, so this elevation tab is very important. And right now it is set to relative to the ground. So basically what that means is whatever my building height, in this case, I think my roof level is about 127 feet. It's just taking that from the ground surface and drawing that with respect to the ground. However, what we really want though is to use absolute height. And we'll notice here, as I change some of these to absolute height, my building disappears completely. Well, what's going on here is if I turn off my 3D ground surface, if I zoom out a bit, you'll see my building's down here. Well, what's going on? Well, when I change that to absolute height, that automatically dropped down to an elevation of 0, which you see my 2D map doesn't care where it's at. It's going to call it elevation 0. But if I want to use a true 3D environment, which is important as we talk about being floor aware, I need that to, that's an important component of my work in indoors. I need to be able to have that absolute elevation. So again, if I turn on that ground surface, it's basically covering up, it's going to cover up my BIM model, which is sitting down at elevation 0. So again, in order to, and this is my floor plan polygon layer showing up there. But again, if I, on my properties, it's kind of cheating if we just set it relative to the ground, but it works for this purpose just to be able to display it. But I wanted to take this data and I wanted to bring it from this native BIM file. And all I did was add these BIM files into my ArcGIS Pro project directly. But I wanted to be able to take this information and plug it into the ArcGIS Indoors model. And what I found was once I got into this, it was kind of messy. Not all the floors were like consistent with some of their attribute information. So that made for a very, very difficult challenge for bringing it in consistently. So that is definitely something to be aware of, that we want to watch out for. When we get BIM data, we want to be able to have a clear understanding of where it came from and what kind of quality we can expect from that. So as far as the standards, maybe some of you are more experts in the area of BIM, but standards are very important to have in place. It's very important to follow any national standards, but as well as anything that is local or within the organization, it's important to maintain those standards. Um, so we'll jump over to one of the things I want to show you while we're waiting on that. I have our Indoors portal pulled up here. So this is, we're running this on AWS on our EC2, and we have our portal established here. So this project I'm looking at, what I'm going to be looking at in Pro is essentially where this data was created, and I published it here to our portal. So with this particular project, I've got a map image layer, which is here. I've got a couple of those actually. And those map image layers are then pulled into the web map, which is then essentially consumed by the web application. And that Indoors viewer that I was telling you about earlier, that's what this is a part of. So we'll kind of touch on that towards the end, but this is where it's going to end up living on our portal. And then of course that would be consumed by portal users who are logged in. They could either log in with mobile or use the Indoors viewer tool. So, okay, so we are back here at our sample project that I want to look at. What you'll notice here is I am signed into our Indoors portal, and that's important. Otherwise, I will not have access to the tools that I need. So I want to have access to the Indoors tools, and I'm going to start by, let's say I just want the Indoors information model. So if I type in Indoors, now I see I've got options here. I've got some geoprocessing tools available to me. The first one is Create Indoors Database. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and we're going to create a blank Indoors database. And I'm going to go, and I've already got a Scratch geodatabase started. It's called WLA demo here. I'm going to select that. And now I've got that selected, I'm going to go ahead and run it. And what this is doing is it's populating this empty geodatabase with the necessary information model. So I'm going to show you the feature data sets it's creating and all of these feature classes that are needed in order to be able to populate and publish for the Indoors solution. Okay, so let's look at our catalog here and let's just explore this geodatabase a little bit. So here we've got these feature data sets. The first one is called Indoors. This is where the foundational components live here. Okay, so we're going to break this down a little and take a look at some of these. So we've got all these different feature classes that are making up our polygons, so to speak, and our data in the maps. And as I open this, I want to take a look at each one of these different feature classes. So here we've got the sample, and I've got some names kind of populating there. But what I want to focus on here is these different feature classes. So I'm going to start with sites. Okay. So if we come out here, turn off my base map, let's zoom to the sites layer. I've only got one site polygon. It's the largest one. We start with sites as the largest one, and then we're going to work our way down slowly, work our way down to more detail. So when you think of using Indoors, think of starting at a high level, at the 10,000 foot level, and then we're going down to the 1 foot level as we gradually look at these different layers. So I've got one site. We'll notice the name of it. It says Roanoke.ac home. This is a local nursing home facility. The next level down, again, this is all part of the model, indoor information model. Next one is facilities. And what's unique is you notice I have several facilities here. And if you look at the name, the facility ID, you can see that it starts with the site name, Roanoke.ac home, and then the next site, the next part of the name is the facility name, which I get from this column here. So this is where I mentioned attribute rules earlier are so important. When we can automate some of this and populate this information, it's very, very valuable in this case, because it's just what it's doing is concatenating information from each of these different layers. So that's the facility layer, and I've got a total of 15 of those here. Now we're going to break it down, and we're going to jump into more detail, and I'm going to look at the main facility here. Okay. And my next component of the, as far as going largest to smallest, is now the level. Okay. I'm looking at the building level, and you'll notice the level name consists of site name, then the building. This building's just called main, and then L1. I'm on level 1. Okay. Then next is sections. Section, for what I'm using it for these purposes, this would represent like an individual apartment or unit. Okay, so if we go to main, I need to select one of these as it's part of my main building. It's unit 5W. All right, let's zoom in a little closer and see unit 5W. Looks like our little bit of a delay here, but this is our unit 5W. So we can see the name here again consists of the site, the facility, and then levels, and then the actual name of the unit. And then one more level of detail I jump to is units. Okay. Units are considered like the room level, the very base level. So this is where, room level, it gets very detailed, very specific. If we go find one of these rooms, or you can select one from my map here, I'm going to select the bathroom, okay, on this particular unit. And if we look at what we've selected here, I want to look at the unit ID. Okay, so this is, again, part of the main building on the campus. Level 1, unit 5W is what this is part of. And this particular room name, I just numbered it 395 is the room ID. But it's very, I can't stress enough the importance of having all of these attributes consistent and have them, making sure that they're matching one another from these different feature classes. So you can see different information. It's a private bathroom, it's a unit, long name. Again, all within this, I consider the indoors data model a flat model, meaning there's not related tables, which kind of makes it nice, but at the same time, it's a lot of attributes to maintain. But facility ID, facility name, section name, and then we can also have contact information. Who do I contact for if there's a problem with this area or this particular room? It provides that information as well. Now there's also fields of elevation as we get into that. This is where it's absolute elevation and relative elevation. It's important that we keep this information in here when it comes to the different floors and being able to navigate on the various floors. So absolute elevation would be your elevation of your base floor level. That'd be like your sea level elevation. Relative elevation would be with respect to that main floor level. So 0, because that's what I'm calling 0 for my particular site here. And then we've got relative height, in this case, 9-foot ceilings on this particular level. And so all of these components are very important as we think about the indoors model. Okay, so if I'm going to start, let's go ahead and let's start a new map. Let's say we're starting a new project, insert a new map. And actually, I don't want to start with a blank map, because then I got to, figure out my symbology, and it just kind of, a lot going on there. So what I actually want to do is let's go ahead and we're going to import a map, and we're going to bring it in. If you remember earlier, I told you about the product data that you can download. Well, Esri's got product data we can download with the Indoors from our My Esri account. And I am going to go ahead and import some map template. In this case, I want to do a feature editing template. So I'm going to go ahead and import this map. It says, hey, this was created in a newer version of Pro, not a problem. This does give me the Esri campus here. by default. And you can see my symbology and layers are all set up over here, but I've got a broken path and I need to repair that data source. So this is a tip and trick to get started quickly. When you deploy this, you want to have your symbology quickly set up and be able to do that. This is kind of a quick and dirty way to get going if you just repair your data source to your particular indoors geodatabase. So in this case, I'm going to point it to my indoors geodatabase that I'm interested in, and it's going to path all those. And then what I can do is I can just zoom to my points of interest in this case, and I will have my symbology and everything set up accordingly already. However, be aware I need to make sure it's proper coordinate system, and I can check that from my map. And in this case, I'm using Web Mercator auxiliary sphere. But you know, you can see I've easily got it set up now with some. Now, for me, I made some changes. I customized my units, which would be my rooms. And whereas they have break room and conference room, this is in the Esri's template, I've added a variety of them, you know, different ones. If we look at my units, I think I've got, you know, bathrooms, kitchen, conference room, things like that. So it's very customizable that you can add different features and capabilities there. So if we expand that, now you can see I've added quite a few of them, added a nice variety there. So, okay, so we looked at the information model. We looked at creating a new indoors database. So that kind of gives us a look and feel for what that, you know, what's behind the scenes. What am I trying to accomplish here? So the other thing, you know, like I said earlier, you're going to either be georeferencing as-built plans, or we're going to be importing CAD data, importing BIM data. Let's say we do have some CAD data, and there's another indoors geoprocessing tool, import floor plans to indoors geodatabase. Okay, that's what I've got here. Input my geodatabase. So in this case, I would select the new one that I created. Okay, and then my Excel template. And those also will come with the product files. In this case, I think we've got those Excel templates in here. I'm probably not going to be able to find them right off the bat here, but the idea is these Excel templates would be able to tell which CAD layers you have, and you would be able to kind of do some field mapping there on where those CAD layers should be imported into. So that's the import floor plans to indoors. The idea is to kind of streamline that. The unique ID delimiter, in this case, if you see what that refers to, is where we have, let's say on our units, or let's do sections. It's basically saying, what do you separate your site and information with? In this case, I'm using a period. So I'm using a period as my unique delimiter. So it would take those CAD layers and it'd be able to create a lot of these names and IDs for you. Okay, so let's talk about attribute rules. Attribute rules is very, very important to be able to have a good understanding of those. If I come back and let's see, if I want to add these attribute rules, I've got several of them, and I was really excited to see Esri add these in because on this project, I had created my own. It took quite a while. If we look at attribute rules I have for my units layer, I can go under data and then attribute rules. And these attribute rules are basically a way to kind of tell it, how do I get my facility ID? How can I populate that in my units layer? Because I don't want to have to come and field calculate these. I don't want to have to manually enter all these. So attribute rules is a great way to automatically calculate that information. So you can see I've got all these in here, you know, get facility name, get site ID. And then if we look, and I'm sorry, I hope this isn't getting too technical for what we had specified for our demonstration here. But if we look, we've got in the expression builder for these attribute rules, we've got the text in there that tells us how we are grabbing that information. And basically we're finding the underlying in this case, the intersecting site, okay? And it says, hey, uh, which site polygon is underneath me? If I'm a small room, this polygon, and just find the site that's underneath me and grab that. So in this case, it's using the intersect command. And then it's saying populate my site ID with whatever you find. And this is all done on the fly while you're doing your editing. So it's really, really helpful. So for example, if I would do, let's just go create a new, let's see here. Let's go back to our sample map here, and let's just create a new room here. Okay, so let's just let's say we're gonna get crazy here, and we're gonna add a bedroom outside. This person's gonna be kind of cold, but we're gonna do it here just to see what happens. And this might actually give us an error in this case on our editing, but let's see. Yep, it did. So what happened was it failed to find some underlying layers beneath that. So that's what we're getting on that error. So that's a way, the attribute rules kind of say, hang on a second, with what you told me, that's not possible. Let's see if we would make one in here, if we'd add a room here, if it would allow us to create that. So that one, it looks like it did work. If we look at those attributes of that feature we just created, it was a bedroom, which is what I selected, and I told it, but look at this. It grabbed the site ID of the underlying site, the site name, the facility ID. It also populated who's the email, who's the contact person, email, name, and phone. It grabbed all of that information from the underlying polygons, which is all because of the attribute rules. So definitely a huge, huge time saver. But be aware if you're going to enable those attribute rules, because I've had a lot of challenges at times getting those imported or enabled. You do have to have global IDs enabled, and those global IDs are not necessarily enabled by default on the Indoors model. So you will want to add global IDs to there. But anyway, that just kind of gives you an idea there on what those attribute rules can do and how valuable they are. So Esri, like I said, I was really excited to see where they have attribute rules that they brought along with the product files. So if we go there, I think it's program data and Esri Indoors product files. And if we look at 2.7, we'll notice that there are attribute rules that are part of that, which is really, really helpful. So these CSVs, this is what we would import. You can import these just by going to, oops, gotta spell it right, import attribute rules. So we can import those CSVs that are provided, and there's a bunch of pre-made attribute rules that'll really help you streamline your process of editing and creating Indoors data. So, okay, let's look at, want to talk about importing the data into the model. So again, if we've got this, maybe we've got a blank or an empty model. My choices are, again, I can import with the floor plans tool. I can manually digitize those, or in this case, what I did a lot of in this example is I did a lot of copying and pasting. Once I had my attribute rules set up, I did a lot of copying and pasting into these, and then you got to, generate the polygons for the rooms. So there's kind of a lot that you can, lots you can go into that. Here, I've just added some people as well. These are all made up names, but we added some people so you can conceptually understand this. If I had a nursing home, management tool here where I'm managing my residents, I could easily use this information for a dashboard. I could see, which ones are employees, which ones are residents. And then, of course, I could then also link that to my other third-party systems if I wanted to. So at this time, I'd like to now get away from ArcGIS Pro, and let's start to look at some more of the actual Indoors. But let's go back. I want to check in with our, where we're at on our slideshow here. Make sure we touched on everything there. I'm going to go back and touch on the pathways yet. I do want to point out that because it's a very important part of the Indoors solution. So I have, going back to our catalog, If I go to, okay, we have the indoors, which I explained, those different feature classes there. I've still got two other feature data sets, one called network, one called preliminary network. The idea is first you create a preliminary network, and this is all for the directions and routing portion of the indoor solution. So looking at preliminary network, I've got preliminary pathways and I've got preliminary transitions. What that does is preliminary pathways, it's going to create basically a mesh network. So let's look at our preliminary pathways here. This is what it's going to generate. And there's a tool, another indoors tool. If I do look at the indoors, there's a tool called Generate Indoor Pathways. That is what I'm going to use that then generates this mesh network. And in that tool, we can see input level features. You got to tell which level you're on. Detail features, which as we zoom in, my details are the green lines, the bathroom, the walls, the toilets, that tells me my details. And from that, I can tell it, what do I want to avoid? What's restricted in my details? What makes up a wall or a door? And that's really helpful because that's what then generates these pathways that are walkable pathways, as the name conveys. Then after I have these course, I don't want to just leave this mesh as part of my route network because it'll slow things down a little. It's too many options. There's no need to have all these nodes in there. So they've come up with a tool that you can thin your pathways with. So thinning those pathways, once you run that tool, this is what you're left with. So this is kind of the circuit board look. This is the optimized version of the routing. So there's only so many paths you can take to get to this point, in this room. There's no need to have there's no need to have our pathways be covering that entire room because it's just not functionally necessary. So this is where we have those simplified pathways here, which really optimize our route network then. Now, there's another thing called transitions. In here we have preliminary transitions. And what transitions do is they connect floors. Okay, so those are going to connect our floors either from stairs or elevators. And let's take a look at an example of those. So I have, let's go to our 3D map, and this is where the 3D part is very important to begin to understand how we use the 3D environment in the indoors editing and setup here. So same data we were just looking at, only now it's in a 3D environment. And this is my refined walkable network that I was showing you, kind of that circuit board. And if we look closely here, we've got, I'm probably going to turn on my details to see it even better. We've got a stairway though, and we have, whoops, that's basically adding height to those details, but I don't want to necessarily do that. But we have a stairway here, and I have to connect the stairway. I have to connect the levels with that stairway. So that's where my transition comes into play. This line here represents the stairwell. You can see there's even a landing that we would turn and go down the rest of the stairs on. That transition is actually going to be used in our routing. And that transition is used when they go from floor to floor. That's what's helping guide the person on that particular route. Now, there's also, if we look here, look over a bit, now I'm kind of looking between the floors. There's, in this case, I think there's an elevator off here to the left. Okay, so the elevator shaft is just straight up and down. But it's important that we have these transitions drawn in as we talk about our routing and how to set those route networks up. And then your final network is just that optimized network. Once you've thinned it down and you got your transitions created, that's when you're going to finalize that network. Okay, so back to our slide deck here. So basically the pathways we talked about, and then the next step would be the publishing. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on the publishing of the web maps, but that would be what we'd want to do is publish those to our portal then. And then the engagement component. Engagement could consist of a variety of things. Here we have building locations. Just at a high level, when you're managing a campus, The first thing you want to know is, okay, which building are we talking about? An easy way to kind of sort these out, an easy way to navigate throughout your campus using your GIS is just through building locations. And here in the example GIF here, we see that's being able to search and select by building name is very important. And then mobile editing. So an example, this is just using collector in this sample, but you can see how with that building floor plan in the background, we can collect information using collector, and we can plug that into our indoor solution as well. We can also have mobile reporting using Survey 123. And this is where we can report data for our facility and be able to report that information easily from a mobile device or a web browser. This is talk about digital transformation of hard copy records. That's a key component, is being able to kind of lay this out and come up with a workflow that can easily capture this information. There's also the big part of this is the indoors mobile component. Now, Esri has an indoors native mobile app, which is important to have. Obviously, we know as we have visitors engaging with our campus, or we have people that are out reporting, they're out and about, and they want to be able to update that through mobile. That's obviously a key component of this. So that is available. I don't have an example specifically that I want to show it for this demonstration, but I do want to make sure I bring up the importance of having that. The idea is you would publish an MMPK, a mobile map package from ArcGIS Pro, and then you would publish that to your portal, and then the Indoors mobile app would then read that through your secure connection to your portal. Routing and navigation. We'll touch on that here in a minute as we kind of finish up with an example, and we can talk about how we can utilize the routing components. And then there's also the real-time system, so real-time tracking, where you would have beacons, or you could use a lighting system to be able to track your users and your mobile devices throughout your campus. Really, really valuable to be able to have those systems in place to navigate. So before we get to this, I do want to go and show you some of the examples as we've been talking about. So this is what I get on my portal when I've published my map, and now I want to set up this what's called the Indoors viewer. It's a very, very simple configuration. It just you give it the app name, and you point it to your web map that's living on your portal. And then in this case, I don't have a scene, but you can easily add your 3D scene, so you can have that additional functionality there. I've also specified for my app here, I've specified my routing service that I created from those pathways that I showed you. We can also have the closest facility, which is also a routing function that we published as part of this when we created this web map. So these are pointing, and those will help us utilize the directions component of this. I can configure a few different things here. Just kind of walks you through as you arrow over here. You can have a 311 system tied to it, survey 123. This is where you would set up those parameters. And for my kiosk mode, which we're going to look at here, I can set the timeout, the number of seconds before it resets back to the home screen on my kiosk. And then I can also customize it with a logo. You can see that I've done that up here on the top left, in this case for a cemetery and mausoleum project. And then just your colors and your regular settings there. So what does this look like in a finished stage? Well, here I've got, and what's nice is you've got the ability to look at this from what's just the viewer standpoint, or if I come in here and you see where it says index in my URL, if I change this to kiosk, I can now have this in kiosk mode, which I really like, that ability to easily toggle back and forth. So you can picture this, picture someone coming into the front lobby here of this cemetery and mausoleum, and it's a large cemetery. They've got over 70,000 burials here. And, I want you to think about, okay, first thing they're going to want to do, they want to find where a burial is at. Okay. So if we just type in a last name here, and let's say, we'll look for Jason. I know he's in this mausoleum here, and it's going to find his location. and I can click on directions. I want to get directions to where he's at within the mausoleum. And you can see not only is it routing me, but it's also routing me in a multi-level environment. So from the lobby, it's telling me I'm going to cut across, I'm going to go through the hallway here, and I'm going to enter into the mausoleum. And these will be, as we click on these, it'll zoom to each leg of that and highlight. And I'm going to take the elevator up, and I'm going to be getting out of that on the second floor. Notice how my floor toggles then, and it's showing me exactly where I need to go to find Mr. Levinson. Now, let's say I want to also find his grandmother. So we're going to look for Dorothy. And let's say I also want to go to Dorothy. Well, Dorothy is outside in the yard of the cemetery. So it gives me additional instructions on how to find where she's at through the cemetery. Again, turn by turn directions there. So again, by clicking on these legs, and then each leg of that will take us where we need to go with very specific details. So that's the kiosk mode. We can explore different things. We can explore all of our memorials. We can look at crypts, which are just within the mausoleum itself, or niches, which are more of the small areas. Again, just easily locating them, finding them, getting directions. Very straightforward. Very useful, especially for the general public that's looking for information. You can see also in our indoors viewer here, we have the nice template that toggles the floor levels. So I can easily jump from one floor to the next. It also has a basement here. You have a chapel in the basement. So very useful information. I could also toggle buildings, and I can easily, on this drop down, I can see all my buildings showing up here that I can be able to address, and easily able to navigate to. In addition, there's an events tab. In this case, we've got some funerals scheduled, so we can use the events and look at a funeral and select that. And we can see where that's at, and we can see the time, the date. Maybe I want to see some more detail, or the funeral home is, or I want to see a link to obituary. A lot of options there, and I can also again do directions, and we can easily get those directions again from the kiosk in the lobby. Our other example that we looked at was with the nursing home project here. If I want to select an individual, I can do a search with people, and I could have one for employees, one for residents, things like that. In this case, we can select one, and we can do directions to and from that person. I can switch those, and I can say, okay, take me to a specific location from where he's at. And that'll give me my, again, turn by turn directions, floor aware. I can pick whether I want elevators or stairways, depending on what accessibility I have and capabilities there. Lastly, just to show you another idea on how you can utilize this. Now, this is a little bit different. What we're looking at here is actually a dashboard, and this is actually ArcGIS Online. So one of the main components I'm missing here is, of course, the easy user friendliness of the indoors template, but I have some other things built into here where I've got a level toggle. I can easily toggle between the basement level and the main level. And I can also select by my unit, and then I can actually, within that unit, select a particular room. And let's say I've got a problem here in this bedroom and I need to report that. I can actually click report a problem. And this is where it's going to pull up a form where I can enter more information on that problem. In this case, it grabs my name and date, and I can say, hey, we've got a furniture problem. And I'm going to say broken bed. And we could attach a photo. Again, I could be doing this from a mobile device as well. And you'll see it logged all that information on that particular room, including the location. And if I hit submit, then that's actually going into a system and logging that. And I actually have another dashboard here that I would like to show you. If we go, let me pull up our ArcGIS Online and show you where the reporting those problems comes in, and can be displayed in a dashboard to give you a lot more functionality there and a little more user friendliness. So this one, look at, will be in our, I believe it's in our reporter here. Let's see. Let's try this one here. So now when I submitted that, issue, I think it was a furniture issue, we can see that popped up on my web app here and be able to see, okay, there is a broken bed. It tells you when it was reported. I can click on that and it'll zoom to that location as well. So really, really valuable to be able to utilize this and be able to tie these things together with Survey 123 and dashboards and be able to report and easily locate that information. And you can see it's here. And then as we check those off, that those have been taken care of, essentially it's a really light work order system. Those would then be able to disappear from off my list of demands. So, okay, and just wrapping things up here, do want to just get back to our presentation, touch on some of our experiences. We've had good success with tying in the indoor and outdoor navigation, as you saw with the mausoleum example. Attribute rules has been a big helpful thing. Definitely want to learn that. Editing in 3D, which has been valuable for us to be able to have that experience, and then integrating with Esri's native apps, as well as some 3D imagery that we've experimented with. Some of the challenges, of course, you hear pricing is a big one with indoors. It's always a popular question. Esri starts their licensing out at 7 cents per square foot with a minimum of 800,000 square feet, which comes to 56,000. That's typical pricing that you'll see for a basic project starting out. Other challenges that we've seen would be the GP tools can be very picky. They're very attribute heavy. We've had some challenges with getting some of those to work at times, but using data reviewer and attribute rules definitely helps clean some of those up. And then creating good route networks using landmarks. There's just a lot of neat tips and tricks you can have with making your routes very user-friendly. And indoor positioning can be a challenge, just getting the setup and the beacons deployed, but it's definitely evolving and becoming more and more valuable. And just some additional resources. Don't forget the Esri resources through their website. We've got indoors expert list you can find on our CloudPoint.geo or cloudpointgeo.com website. And then there's data curation workshops out there. There's just a lot of different features. We've also got some webinars. We've got a webinar whole series dedicated to ArcGIS Indoors. And then we've also got Kickstart packages, something that your organization wants to look at and kind of get up and running with. So that's all I have here for today's presentation. If we wanted to, I don't know if there's any questions, Grace, or anything, be happy to try to answer those.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. We do have one question in the chat here. And just so our audience knows, we still have 5 minutes. So if you do have any other questions, please put them in the chat. But okay, John, so our question is, can temporary instances be set up for things like wet floors and part of the building under renovation or something like that, that breaks the normal route?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. So for something that's temporary, you could easily do that if you would set that up in a way that you have an additional layer you want to add. The challenging part, and if we go back and just briefly look at our portal here, one of the difficult things is the idea that you have to publish this map package. And so, you're kind of limited somewhat on once you publish this. If we go ahead, let's just kind of look at our web map here, kind of explain this a little better. You have you're publishing the entire web map from ArcGIS Pro, um, which you have here and it's good, but this is, you're also somewhat limited. It kind of depends on how often you want to publish and republish. If you're talking about temporary, things that are under construction, renovation, you're going to have a way to um, take that new renovation and load it into your ArcGIS Indoors solution. Really, the only way to do that is going through ArcGIS Pro. Um, there's really not another good way to do that. So you would make your updates to your floor plan in Pro, and then you would essentially republish that. Would probably be my recommendation.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't see any other questions coming in. Again, if anyone wants to ask John any questions,
And
please type them up, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you.
And I will clarify one thing there, Grace. I know I
Mhm.
had showed the ArcGIS Online solution using the dashboard, and this is using the Indoors Information Model, but it's not necessarily. This doesn't have the routing capabilities because it's not stood up on that portal. This is just basically what you're seeing here is an interactive web map. But what I don't have with this then, of course, is the customized directions and routing that we saw in the other, or the Indoors viewer template. So, but you can enable your ArcGIS Online organization for Indoors use, which in that case, you could see exactly what I showed from our portal.
Awesome. Well, do you have anything else you want to share quickly? Otherwise, we can switch it over to a few slides from our sponsors before we get started with our next presentation.
Yeah, that's all I had. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much, John. We appreciate you too.